I'm here.
Hello. Hi. Thank
Hey.
you. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. And sorry about the confusion. Google Meet just does not work for my computer for some reason.
Yeah, no problem. Happens. Yes. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Mhm.
How's it going?
It,
And yeah,
it's going great. Yeah, how's it going for you?
good. Yeah, sorry for the last minute postponement. Had some
Oh,
plans.
no.
I just wrapped up my internship and I'm in the vacation mode already.
Yeah,
So,
of course. Of course. That's amazing. Where are you interning right now?
so I interned in Microsoft Redmond. I just
Mhm.
came back to New York again and going to Colombia, the country, next week. Some
Nice.
But yes, so yeah, I just wrapped up my internship. Tell me about yourself
Sure,
and
sure.
some
Yeah,
comment.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Do you mind if I record this so I can share it to other interested students?
Yep, no problem at all. Yeah.
Okay, for sure. Um, So yeah, I mean a little bit about myself. My name is Mihir. I'm a high school student and we run an AI club and we love to talk to people who are doing like interesting research. And one of the papers that caught our attention was your work on the hint generation. And one of the things that we do is we just look at some of the recently posted archive papers and it was just really interesting for us to read and we just wanted to speak to one of the authors more. So we thought it was just worth reaching out.
Yeah. What do you do in your high schools? I have no context of American education. Tell me more
Right.
about yourself. I can tell you about myself in a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I do have a list of questions, but we can get to that soon. So, in terms of like what we do, it's usually like a structured course set, structured courses throughout the day, all multidisciplinary stuff. But in specifically the AI club, which I run, we meet for 30 minutes once a week, and we'll just talk about these papers. It's kind of hard because there's no official way to like or there's no structured AI learning, and that's like the hot craze. Everyone wants to do AI, right? But in our
Right.
school district, there's no structured way to learn it. So this is just our attempt to try and be more educated on the subject.
That's very proactive of you, honestly. Because most, if not all, like AI based papers tend to be like graduate level stuff, and you
Right.
being in high school trying to crack that yourself as a group. Yeah, very commendable. So that's
Yeah.
great.
Mm.
Yes,
Yeah.
and very
Thank you.
fascinating. And reading research is definitely like one of the best ways to know about a relatively quite new field in terms
Sure.
of broad sciences. Like AI within community has been like what 40, 50 years old.
Right.
But yes, yeah, makes sense. Do you
Yeah.
want me to introduce myself a bit, or like, do you want to get
Um.
started with questions? Like, yeah,
Sure. I mean, I can get started. The first question is pretty much an introduction here. Okay, so my first question here, right, is can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey in like computer science and NLP?
right. So I'm Anubhav. I'm right now. I should call a second year PhD student in Colombia. I just wrapped up my first year. I specialize in natural language processing. About my research journey. So after my high school, I started my undergrad in India, majoring in computer science. And during my undergrad, I think I explored a lot. In my first year, I started like competitive programming, learning Python, C++,
Sure.
plus plus, all those things, and then going into web development a bit, and then app development, and then I was like, okay, then I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And then I was like, let's study more. So I aim to like get an even better education than my undergrad university, maybe a master's or a PhD, and then that's what got me into research and NLP. And back in undergrad, I explored a lot more like non-deep learning based research problems.
Sure.
For example, summarization and genetic algorithms and so on and so forth. But like TLDR, then I spent 2 years in Google research as a pre-doc or an AI resident. And
Sure.
then that got me into Colombia. So that's a bit of
Right.
my research journey. But
Amazing. Yeah. So like stemming off of that, one of the things that, we just thought, from our perspective, it's hard to understand what path we want to go down in the future. Everyone's interested in AI, but what specific sector of AI, something like that. So a question that I might have is, what if you could point to maybe one or two things that really sparked your interest in NLP specifically, or would you say it was more of a gradual process just through learning a lot of things?
Right. So before answering that, I would like to address one very important thing. It's great that you're interested in AI and are looking into this field with much more rigor than I would have, or most of my friends who are right now doing AI would have.
Right.
Before telling you what sparked my interest, I would like to really call out one thing, that it is really important to have some like background understanding and everything. But like learning AI does not necessarily mean that you just have to focus on AI, and everything else that you have an exposure to learning towards contributes towards what kind of research problems would you want to explore with
Sure.
AI. So AI is not just a field, it's more of a tool that you can equip to get things better. I have
Hmm.
friends who are really interested in like electronics and communication, and right now they are applying systems research within AI. Some were interested in like
Right.
civil engineering, and now they are
So kind
exploring.
of interdisciplinary almost.
Yes. And that's something that I admire a lot, honestly, about like AI. Like, not just like core AI model making and building better technology, but what's much more important is being able to contribute to the real world in a meaningful as well as cautious way. An emphasis on the cautious part. And
Yeah.
like, that's what I think, like, something that drives AI towards me. In order, in like specifically talking about NLP, I think my undergrad did not have a lot of great research opportunities, and
Sure.
NLP was one of those that was much more prominent than others. So
Hmm.
that was what you would say a starting point for me. But what kept me hooked was that I, first of all, like whatever the things I was exploring were very interesting, very new. And besides the small perks of the ability to go to conferences and meet people in very fancy places, I guess like being able to develop systems with some sort of like cognitive ability of like being
Sure.
able to
Hmm.
do things is what like hooked me to NLP much more than something like vision. I found
Right.
NLP to be much more interesting at a personal scale. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, awesome. I think, yeah, I mean, the way you are introduced to the subject definitely plays a role in how you end up pursuing your career in it. I think another the interesting point about interdisciplinary is a really cool concept too, because it means that you don't really have to give up your side passions. Like you can do them. It's like AI is not really like a field, it's more of a tool, like you mentioned. So it can really it's more like interdisciplinary. So I think that's an interesting point there.
Right. And like optimizing not for that one like cool thing, but instead one impactful,
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
like that not might not be like the most important for most, but a sub part of the population. And that's also a very important contribution. Just a mindset thing, I think you grow with this over time and develop your flavor of working with
Right.
things.
Right. Yeah, I think I have questions for advice later too. So you're already jumping the gun here. So
Yeah. Sorry about that.
um no, no, you're good. You're good for sure. I mean, I love it. I love it. Um, so okay. So maybe stemming off here. One of the things, like I said, we are talking about that hint generation paper that we really found interesting. Um, I was just wondering if you'd be able to maybe give us a simple overview of that research, or if there's another piece of research that you think we'd find interesting. Anything that you really like, just maybe want to discuss here.
Right.
Yeah.
So in generation, I think the paper you might have seen was more of a survey that I wrote very recently. And it's called like I think it's called navigating the hint generation landscape or something. So it's more or less a roadmap of what I want to do in my PhD.
Mhm.
So many things that I've explored there, I've pitched there. Don't just talk about the possibilities of doing things, but also count towards me laying down things very formally and expressing
Sure.
this is the thing that I'm interested in. So I think before diving into the hint generation space, I would like to like I'm not sure, so I'll give you some background on different kinds of research papers that you might
Sure.
have in LP, and how survey is a different kind of contribution than other things.
Right.
So like there is model papers where we develop models.
Mhm.
There's benchmarks where you create new data sets and show how existing models perform well or not well in this new task.
Sure.
There's evaluation metrics, which is really hard. Also important these days is like uh, how how good are the models? Can you automatically create ways or devise ways to indirectly
Right.
measure that?
Mhm.
And then I think there's like opinion pieces, which is very interesting. Opinion pieces is where you don't discuss, where you don't propose a new model, but
Right.
summarize the field a bit, but more focus towards certain aspects or ask out questions towards the community.
Right.
And the fifth one or the sixth one, I lost count, is the survey, where you consolidate something that has happened in the field and discuss some future possibilities to guide it towards that. So this paper that I wrote, it kind of was in middle of an opinion piece and a survey. The first stuff is a survey consolidating. So okay, let me give you background of hint generation first. The project of hint generation is focused in the broader space of NLP for education, where the idea is that you want to improve the self-learning capabilities of an individual such as yourself or myself who is trying to learn certain skills. But what usually happens with self-learning is if you're unable to solve something, you will look at the solution or you will like just look at the answer and say, okay, this is how things work. But in hint generation, the difference is that you would uh, keep the brain muscle a bit working and reveal some part of the information while still giving you a complex enough task to solve to improve your challenges. And the
Right. Some
idea,
sort of collaboration almost.
yes, some sort of collaboration, and like that's the idea of hint generation. Within that space, I think in the survey, I first consolidate all the efforts within hint generation as well as the education landscape. So that's what it's one of my first exposure to the interdisciplinary research, to be honest. Not first, maybe, but like definitely for education. So, in order to make some scientific remarks towards a very big field such as education, I think like it's very important to do my due diligence on what the field has to offer. And
Sure.
that's why I
Mhm.
wrote the survey. Uh, Consolidating everything, all the human experiments that teachers, pedagogical research has done on how to educate students, what works, what doesn't work, consolidating that into the survey. And all
Right.
the efforts within the hint generation space we have had so far. And just to give you some idea, like code generation is the problem that the most it has been most explored for hint generation. If you're trying to like create a small program for something, then a system might take an initiative and tell, hey, this is the line that might not work. Think about it more. So those kind of like hints to develop programs is the most explored problem.
Right.
Understandably so, because code is much more objective and quantizable than natural language.
Mhm.
With the advent of these large language models today, I think you can explore more like history-based, geographical-based questions. Geography would require multi-model models where you would have image-based hints and like text-based hints to get you to the answer. And the second half is more of an opinion piece that explores, now that we know this is the idea about hint generation landscape, and this is the overall space of NLP that we have obtained so far with definite reasoning abilities. Where
Right.
do we go from here? So that's where I bring out, I think, six or seven different new areas. It's been a while. As I said, I was just in an internship, and that's why like I've lost track of exactly what I did.
Sure.
But like I think that's where I propose all the future
All the
possible.
future.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I mean, yeah, I think that's definitely different. I think a survey piece is definitely different than some of the other pieces that we've read as a group. You know, maybe the same question can be asked and they would probably prompt different answers. But in a model piece, you might have some technical challenges that you face. But here's a question for you. What are some key challenges that you faced, maybe in the putting together of this paper? It's probably a different
Right.
type of question that you'll have to answer
Yes.
here.
So one thing with surveys is that you need to be very thorough. Unlike like your new idea that a model you came and just to be frank, I'm also working on a model for hint generation. I made that survey like in January or February, And since then, I've been devising new hint generation technologies that's not out in the public yet, but maybe in some future reading sessions. But coming back to the question about the challenges you face in surveys. So this was not my first survey, so I did have some exposure from my past experience in writing surveys. But I think one of the biggest challenges in surveys, you need to be thorough. Like you
Right.
cannot let out some important papers in the field. You have to have a very good consolidation of existing research.
Right.
And the biggest two challenges I'll say in any survey are consolidating the ideas and proposing a taxonomy that is very meaningful.
Sure.
What are
Hmm.
different ways in which like existing research differs while they are similar? What are the different technologies? What are the data sets out there? What are the commonalities there? That's the big challenge. And any good survey would have this second important thing that also is a challenge, is proposing directions in which this field will go moving
Hmm.
forward.
Right.
And you have a lot of power in a good survey to actually guide the community in certain directions.
Sure.
So
Hmm.
whatever you write there would be something that some researcher might pick up and work on moving forward. And you have to be very, yeah, it's a visionary aspect to research, I guess.
Right, for sure. So, kind of like another extension from that, you know, as you did that survey, right, learning about all these different everything, pretty much everything in this field of NLP and hint generation, right? You talk about being thorough, so you pretty much learn a lot of stuff. What would you say are some, you probably mentioned in the paper, and it's probably out of I'm probably losing it right now. But if you could maybe touch on some of the key future directions that you discussed, key future directions or key findings that you discussed in that.
Right. So I can tell you what I plan to do, I guess.
Mhm.
So like
Well, I
so
think I think if you wouldn't like that information to be public, then you can
no, no,
skip that
I'll
or
tell you this. So it's again an attitude and mindset thing.
okay.
Yeah, I'll just say my thought on this. But I think like there are two kinds of people, one that have very important ideas that they would rather not share, and the others where you would like to share. In scientific community, it's my personal belief that the more you share and discuss your research ideas, your prospective thoughts on certain
Right.
things, not hold your ideas,
Hmm.
uh, the more you'll get feedback and the more fleshed out they'll be. Like
Sure, sure. Hmm.
for this last summer, I've talked to, I think, over 100 Microsoft employees discussing my
Wow.
upcoming research directions.
Hmm.
And that has led me to connect to a lot of people who have already worked in some of these directions, who have 20 years of exposure working in education, for example.
Right.
And it's once you like open up, put your ideas out there, that you get feedback on how good this is. And given research projects take like 6 months to like even 2 years to complete, so it's
Mhm.
big commitments, and you want to make sure that what you're working on will be meaningful for the community.
Right.
But yeah, so like I can just tell you this. So like let's start with the thought of this project that you want to work on hint generation. I'll take it as a journey of what would you like to do and how would like maybe I consider tackling this problem. Now, let's say I have enough time in this world and I want to make meaningful systems that can be useful.
Sure.
So, and I want to develop frameworks that can provide meaningful hints to to someone who is trying to answer a question, right?
Right. Right.
Now, in this formulation itself, there are a lot of complexities that you can spread out and
Sure.
explore. So then someone can ask you, what kind of questions are you looking at? Are they short form answers? Are they multiple choice question answers? Or are they
Right.
long
Right.
answers that require a lot of detailed responses that are coherent, cohesive, and makes a lot of sense, right? So that's the first degree of segregation: objective question answering, subjective short form question answering, subjective long form question answering, or objective long form question answering, right? So there are two axes, whether the answers have a determinative response or not, and how detailed and complex does the answer need to
Right.
be, right?
Right.
And these are all different research problems. Being able to generate and evaluate consistent long form responses, a research direction on its own, and identifying useful responses and hints towards objective questions that by itself a hard challenge. So, and that's what I aim to like. like work on in the next few years. So I
Sure.
start off with objective question answers, short form, because that's a good starting point. You have much less variables to explore, like to handle, I guess,
Sure.
and
Hmm.
much more control over things. And then what I did was I looked at existing data sets for hint generation, no, for question answering that are short form and are objective. And I found that okay, this particular scientific question answering data set is good. And scientific question answers, you would know, have like an objective answer to it. So that
Right.
fits the categories. And then you come up with like some hint generation strategies and everything. That's how like I flesh out a problem. And another angle of difference that could be in the same formulation is this time I last time I asked what does the question answers look like, short form, long form, objective, subjective. But now I'll ask what should a hint look like, right?
Sure. Hmm.
That adds a different layer of complexity. Should the
Right.
hint be like let's say for math question answers, the hint can be the next line in the sequence of
Sure.
equations, right?
Hmm.
It could be a natural language hint. For geography or biology questions, it could be a multi-model hint that gives you
Right.
a diagram or a figure, point to that, and talks about certain things.
For
And
sure.
that generation multi-model problem now, and that's
Mm.
another layer of complexity.
Right.
Then, then you can ask the question, who are the users? And now in this case, the users can be domain experts who are
Right.
trying to further their skills, for example, graduate level researchers, right? Or they could be like high school, mid school students who are new to the field and who have limited exploration, right?
Right.
And another one could be personalization. Do you want your systems to personalize to certain hints? Like they're given hints that resonate more with you. For example,
Right.
I'm someone who would love to associate things with historical incidents and make connections
Mm.
that way. So why are certain countries in tension today? So this goes back to certain like events. Could be an economy based hints if someone is more interested in the financial
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
So these are different ways or axes in which you can change the problem, and that gives you a different research problem to tackle on its own.
Right.
Right. These
I
are all,
think
yeah. Sorry, go on.
no, I was just gonna say like you started off at one level and then kept adding more and more and more. Like I think that's definitely a good point. I think, considering how much research you've done, there's probably a large number of possibilities where you could go, and there's definitely new possibilities every turn just by adding that other level of complexity. I think that last point that you made about users is definitely something that I didn't consider. I think that that's definitely, you can't just make it, because I think a model suited for a younger student would not be applicable to an older student. So I think that that's definitely an interesting point there.
Right. Yeah. And this is how, like, I think, like, from this, I wanted to demonstrate how you typically perceive any problem. Just to give you an example of more fleshed out problem like summarization, people started off by extractive summarization, where the goal was just to select sentences and put them in a sequence to give them a response.
Sure.
Then,
Mhm.
once models are good enough for that and new possibilities and breakthroughs happened, people looked at abstractive summarization, where the expectation was you consume everything in the input and obtain an abstract output out of that.
Right, right.
Once we were good at solving it, we developed multilingual summarization frameworks,
Mhm.
multi-model summarization frameworks, where now they looked at not just the text, but also the images in the news article to obtain the response.
Right.
And then more and more layer of granularity was added and complexity. And these are all like all the problems that I'm exploring are full like 50-year careers of researchers, for example.
Yeah.
So each of these small problems today would boom into a sub community, possibly. But that's like the visionary aspect of like being a researcher. You have to
Right.
pick problems that are meaningful, not just to you, but for some part of the population. Maybe to you, like if you find things interesting, but that's my ideology.
I think that's definitely very fascinating. I mean, I love how I love how you framed that, right? You took it, that there's so many questions that you could explore just by thinking a little bit. And I think that, the applications are there's so many real world applications, especially for hint generation. The impact it could have on like education in the future is amazing. So I think. Um, I think yeah, those are primarily the questions I had about your research. I did want to maybe take a step out and ask some more general questions about NLP and AI.
Sounds
Um,
good.
so here's one that I did have. So let me just read through these questions and figure out which one might be the best one here. So um, so yeah, maybe here's one. How might like advances in natural language processing in the future change the way we would like assess student understanding? Like beyond just testing, right? This is not a hint generation style question here. Just more of a general like idea because you can convey understanding in different ways and some people complain, right? Especially for me, right? I'm graduating this year, so I just took the SAT. And some people will say SAT is not a good way of, characterizing how much you understand. So, do you think that there's a potential for natural language processing to augment the way we look at that student performance?
Um, Definitely so. But I'll say, I'll rather ask you a question. Should you assess a student's performance based on machines to provide a label?
Okay. Okay, that's definitely an interesting point there.
Right? And with that, I'll publicize another research direction, that is responsible AI, where
Sure.
you look at ways to responsibly use AI so that it's not misused.
Right.
A very easy example for that would be surveillance,
Hmm.
where we have developed the systems that are good enough to influence real people's life by surveilling on them. But yeah, I'll answer your answer question honestly, but like I just wanted to make sure that you think about what I said.
Right.
Uh, because like there are education systems out there. I know like Finland, for example, does not have standardized tests until very late in their life because you don't want to assess someone's capabilities by their understand. Like I know like understanding is very subjective, very independent, but generally any way of like testing someone in one thing does not give you a complete understanding of them as a person.
Right.
uh but that's like a whole different question to ask. But
Yeah.
in terms of understanding, I think, I don't know, like you can kind of try to find a way to assess someone's like capabilities, but that would still require the user to provide, verbalize, or formulate their understanding in some way, right?
Sure.
At given this is an NLP, natural language test like processing, you need things to be presented in natural language.
Right.
I think SATs are a good standardized way, although I don't think they are the ways that should, like they should not be the decisive factor in like any decision making in terms of students
Mm-hmm.
education. But any such like mechanism would have its flaws. um
I
and I
think
think,
so.
yeah, automated assessment of like responded answers is something that is very fascinating. In fact, it's part of my research beyond
Mm-hmm.
hint generation, because like how do you assess whether the responded answer is correct? How do you formulate hints for an incomplete answer subject to a complete answer? You need a
Right.
way to write answers in order to get that right, or assess quality of answers to see if more hint is required, for example. So in terms of answer assessment capabilities, yes. Student understanding is a whole different thing. Even if you are able to understand things well, doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to verbalize it good enough to get the
Right.
response.
Right.
So that gap is not something that can be like closed by current AI, at least. Might be
Sure.
something in the future. We should never discard possibilities, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of variables to consider. I think the point that you bring up is that, this is a natural language processing thing, and it's processing, as it says, the natural language. So a gap between understanding and verbalizing is not something that you expect that to be able to be capable of
Yep.
doing. I think that's definitely an interesting point. So I think three more questions here. Um, so here's one question that I had about educational assistance, right? How might like NLP powered educational assistants, potentially with the capability of hint generation, right, evolve to maybe provide a more like nuanced and context aware support to learners, maybe in the future, how it like evolves?
Right. So I'm working in this research direction, so I do see value in this.
Hmm.
And the motivation for that will be that not all the teachers in the world are able to get to all the students in the world, right?
Right,
And therefore, if there's a way to, first of all, like I would like to again point out that if you want to work on problem like this, you have to work very responsibly, develop systems like that you are sure work the way they are meant to,
right,
and being able to do research and get it out there into a product is a very big process by itself.
right,
Having worked in some industry, I can say that with very confidence that the bar for a research paper is much lower than a product in terms of the quality of the model and performance. But yes, since we are short on time, I'll just say that Y- Yes, there are a lot of ways in which we can improve education by using AI based technologies. I
right,
think personalized learning is the most important one in the entire space. You can develop like personalized systems that are able to understand, but not necessarily understand, but gauge what the students are emphasizing on and not the other way around.
sure,
Another one would be automated checking and assessment, as you asked.
right,
And beyond that, I think being able to support the learning process in various ways would be another one.
right.
Make things
Yeah.
happen that currently cannot. But yeah,
For sure. I think you mentioned that you can never rule out future possibilities. So I think that that's, while we might not be at that point now, potentially in the future, that's a state that we can get to. So yeah, just two more like even more general questions here. Here's one about industry. Okay. So I know I understand that you're a PhD student, right, working in academia, as well as you have experience at Microsoft. You mentioned I read that you worked at Google. I mean, you spoke about reading at Google for working at Google for a little bit. Yeah, Google. So one question I had here was, given your experience like working in both academia and industry, what would you say are some differences in terms of like research approaches, goals, collaboration, maybe some of the challenges, just like general compare contrast kind of.
yes. So I'll say the biggest reason why academia attracted me to do a PhD in the first place was something I found out after like 6 months into my PhD. I still didn't know why I wanted to do a PhD, but the biggest one was being able to pursue problems that interest you,
Right,
motivates you, and draws you. In industry, you might not always have the choice to work on problems that are interesting to you. Academia also doesn't always guarantee that you
yeah,
need to have a good fit with your supervisor and yourself to be able to make some useful contributions. In industry, there's much more abundance of resources and the ability to do real world impact,
right, right,
being able to develop product features or tools that people in the order of millions and billions can work on is not something that academia equips you. But what academia equips you with is like being able to work on meaningful problems, question the existing realm of the way we do things in the first place.
right,
Industry might not give you the flexibility in that way. Money wise, I think like there's no like question. Academia is like a really well funded place, but the bar there is also high as well as in academia. But like I think the journey that academia provides you is like much more like learning to be independent, being a PhD student,
sure.
like
Mhm.
so yeah, both have pros and cons, and I think that's why trying to expose yourself to both side of the coin is the way for you to explore what works and doesn't work for you.
Sure. And you've done so very successfully. I think that working at all these different places is really amazing. Um,
I'll just tell you that everyone that I've talked to more or less has an inferiority complex, and something that like I think yeah, I'm emphasizing on mental health a lot because I think you all being high school students, I think it's really important to bring it out. Apologies if I've gone over the notch with that, but that's
yeah,
what.
yeah, you're good. You're good. You're good. I
Yes.
think, yeah, I think you've answered a bunch of our questions here, and actually, this last question, I think you've probably already answered it, like in all the different questions. But maybe if you just want to summarize here, right, from your position, right, all these different experiences, what advice would you give to aspiring students, let's say high schoolers and early undergrad students who are interested in pursuing a career in NLP or AI?
Right. I'll say making sure that you have a strong background in maths is one. Learning probability, statistics, calculus, all those things. Even if things are not directly applicable right off the bat, they will be moving forward. Although this doesn't necessarily mean that maths, if maths is not your strong suit, then this field is not for you. There are a lot of flavors of research, but trying your best to get your fundamentals right is first. I think learning to program would be another. Like you start early, you like just learn different languages, just try to do cool things, right? Like I remember when I was starting to learn a language, I started off by like programming my own blackjack code with GUIs and all those things. That's a fun way to like just learn how to make, how to change a code into a real functioning application.
Right, right.
That's always helpful. Like as I said, I learned web dev in my first year and it's useful now.
Yeah.
So all the things that you learn along the way are important, but prioritizing what you want to learn because we have limited time is also important, I guess. What all you can do is, other than maths, coding is like reading papers, as you all are doing very fabulously, if I may. It's like it's something that even I, as a researcher, struggle to like keep up with the research work in my field. And I think other than that, just trying to learn, not just to learn, but learning to build things that might be helpful for you, right?
Sure.
For
Hmm.
example, like you have access to a camera, you can take 50 photos, 100 photos of certain room situation, let's say, and then trying to train a classifier of, hey, is my room dirty or clean?
Sure.
And what is my knowledge of whether a room is dirty or clean? And
Right.
collecting data for, let's say, 50 days or 100 days, and trying to then do statistical analysis on that,
Mhm.
right? So something I was doing with my healthcare was trying to keep tab of how much am I exercising, how much am I eating. And
Right.
then next day I was doing a happy or a sad like sentiment classifier.
Hmm.
And then I was like gonna, so things don't plan out always, but what I was gonna do is like train a classifier to predict what degree of health aspect affects my happiness the next morning.
Sure. Hmm.
So these are all very like nerdy aspects to things, I'll say,
Hmm.
honestly, but it's something because as I said, AI equips you to do things that otherwise you would not or would
Right.
struggle to do, right? So find out what are some things in your life that might be helpful with AI, and then see and try to apply things, learn skills to get that happen. And from a hiring perspective, be it an industry or academia place, I think that does show a lot more than saying, hey, I trained a dog cat classifier in the first
Right.
place. But like it's really fun. Like I think just enjoy the process, don't feel very
Sure. For
pressured
sure.
or anything, don't compare yourself. It's a really important thing, I think, and the sooner you hear it from someone, the better, I guess. But yeah.
Hmm. For sure. Well, thank you so much, Anubhav, Dr. Jangra. Or soon
Not
to
yet.
be,
Yeah.
soon to be, soon to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. All your insights were really, really great for us. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, my pleasure. And
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Mhm. Yeah. All right.
Have a,
Have a wonderful day.
you too. Bye.
Bye bye.